I'm here in the orchard for our midsummer update, checking on the progress of all the trees. And this year we've got good news and bad news. So I always kind of like to start with the good news. So we're standing next to some of it right here. And this is our second apricot that we had to get this year. They ran out last year, as I mentioned in the first video. And we picked this up first thing. And didn't put it in the ground right away because we had some late frosts going on. So I kept it, moving it in the house during the night, and did not get affected by the frost. The bad news is that a couple of our other apricot and peach, were damaged severely by the frost. Even though there wasn't any buds, flower buds happening, the leaves got damaged, and we'll talk about it later down the line. But look here, we've got lots of apricots on here, which since we didn't have another apricot that was budding, tells you that they can self-pollinate, even though we were under the impression that you need 2 of these. And we even took half of the fruit off of it because it is the first year, and we couldn't resist letting some of it go, but we didn't want to have it put too much energy into the fruit. So it's doing really good, and we're looking forward to tasting those when they get ripe. Coming over here, we have pretty good luck with our cherry tree. We had issues last year with aphids and powdery mildew and Japanese beetles, and we've already talked about what we did earlier in the video. And it looks like the aphids and the powdery mildew are not a problem this year. We have seen no sign of either one of them. So the horticulture oil was a success. The spores for the Japanese beetles seemed like they were a partial success, but not completely. Last year we were getting beetles in May, and this year I thought we were going to avoid them altogether. They started showing up in June, and delayed. So immediately it was the cherry again being attacked, and the plum, a couple of them down there. So I got out the Japanese beetle trap, put one at each tree, and before long I noticed on the plum that the limb that the Japanese beetle trap was hanging next to was getting eaten up worse than the rest of the tree. So it occurred to me that we're probably attracting them, and my wife Holly had already mentioned she suspected that might happen. We weren't sure if it was good or bad, so we did a little research, and it turns out that yes, you're not supposed to put them close to the trees in the orchard you're protecting. Matter of fact, they don't even recommend them for small-scale residential areas. So we took our beetle traps and we moved them way across the driveway over on the other side where there's no fruit trees or anything we care about, and just to kill beetles if we can. But however, I do have one of the little bags here, and I'm going around and manually catching these beetles. So I just started to do it with just the bag, and it was too hard to hold open, so I decided to put a little funnel in there, and that actually makes it easier to hold on to it. So we're going to show you how to catch a Japanese beetle. Come on over here, and if you look up on this leaf right here, you can see there's 3 of them. 2 of them there, they're actually mating. Come on over. Come on right up in on that. Can you see the 2 on the top up there? Oh, they're going. They're going. They're going. I got to get 2 more examples. See, you can't wave your hand around them. Otherwise, they take off on you. Let's come on around and see if we can find another one. All right, here's one right here. Come around behind me. Now come up close. I want you to hear the sound too. It's actually quite cathartic when you hear that little tink. You see the beetle on the leaf? And just scare them and they fall off. And I'm talking so you didn't hear the noise. But you can actually hear a little tink as it goes down the hole, and it's like gratifying. So that's what you can do to get the beetles that, here's some right here. Come on up in here, watch these. I'm not going to talk this time. Come close so you can pick it up with the mic. You hear that? I love it. There's some more. So you just kind of can't let them, in the morning is best when they're still cold and they can't fly away. Once the daylight comes, or the heat starts to heat up, they're more apt to fly away. You got to get a little better at it. So that's what we're doing. Now a little more research I found out. They were killed in this area, but they came from somewhere else. That's why there was a delayed effect. And apparently, if you use a cedar oil and spray your trees after they leaf out in the spring, before the Japanese beetles arrive, the scouts that they send out looking for food sources will not be attracted. They'll be repelled from your trees due to the cedar oil, and they'll just leave you alone. So that's what we're going to try next spring. It's no good to do it now. They've already found the orchard. They know it's here. So apparently, according to the research I've done, that it's not effective to put cedar oil on now. So we're going to try that next year. Our Bartlett pear is doing really well this year. A lot of new growth on it. Not being affected by the Japanese beetles at all. Unfortunately, we didn't get any fruit because of those 2 hard frosts. It must have got the buds. Same with our cherry. We had 1 cherry on it and it's gone now. It never made it. But we're pretty happy with the growth on it. I do have to do a little trimming. You can do some trimming during the summer to remove dead wood and water sprouts, because there's no sense in letting those water sprouts go when you're going to cut them off in the winter anyway. So you're allowed to do a little trimming. As I mentioned, we wanted to sterilize our pruners in between each tree, so if there is a disease, we don't spread it. And this one here, we've got 1 water sprout coming up from the center trunk there, and it's growing across this other one. It's really not desirable, so we'll take that one off. Oop, that was the leaf. There we go. One thing I forgot to mention, not only have I been tying down these branches that I pruned earlier in the spring, this one needed I'm trying a wedge spacer thing here. I cut a board with notches, because when I tried to pull this branch down, the whole tree came with it. And the only way I could get that spread there was to install this little block in there. Over here we have our Honeycrisp apple, which is getting a little assault from the Japanese beetles. You can see the type of damage. If you zoom in, it's called a skeletonizing effect. And that's a sure sign that your Japanese beetles are eating away at those leaves. And they like to be up high. So whenever you're checking, look up high. Actually, I can see some up on that leaf right up there right now doing some damage, and I'll have to go get my bag and catch them after we get done doing this video. But I don't think there's any trimming that needs to be done here. No apples, frost. Over here is our peach, one of our peaches. And it was very disappointing because it had lots of new growth on it in the spring. It had leaf buds going everywhere, and all these flower buds that never even made it. And that frost came, and I thought since it didn't have flower buds, it wasn't vulnerable. I would have tried to cover it, because it's so small. I could have put a bag over it. And next thing I know, the leaves are falling off. And fortunately, we got some suckers coming up down here, and we're going to let those grow untrimmed this year so that it keeps the roots alive. I don't know if this thing's going to do anything in this next spring or not, but if it doesn't, we will prune off the unusable suckers and start a new main stem instead of buying another $100 tree. So it'll set us back a few years, but oh well, that's what happens, right? Our plum is being battered again by the Japanese beetles. It's really struggling. We got no plums on it, probably the frost. But it's going to hang in there. I think it's going to make it. And hopefully next year we can solve this problem with the cedar oil. No trimming required on this. As you can see though, I have been tying down branches, as I mentioned in my spring video. Any of these ones that, if you see here, I cut off here. And I left an upward facing bud, which turned into that. And then when I pulled it down, we've got the good angle for getting this tree up. I'm trying to bring them up out of the deer's reach. So, our other disaster here was our apricot, one of our apricots. Same thing, lots of leaves. They got frosted. And fortunately this one does also have some suckers coming up down there. Not as vigorous as the other one, but it looks like it's going to make it. So we'll try to do that and act like it's a root graft, a new little stem coming up there, and turn it into a tree. Our other pear is doing excellent as well. Not affected by the Japanese beetles. You can see, look at the new growth on it. Come on over here, you'll see though I do have some water sprouts growing in the center of this thing, which have to be removed. You don't want these here, so there's that one. All these here are just going to be unproductive. Let me try over here where I can see what I'm doing. This thing's really doing well. Again, I think it got frosted, so it has no fruit on it. But that's not the worst thing that can happen, because we'll develop a nice, healthy tree for future growth. Sometimes it's hard to pick the fruit off, so I guess if nature does it for you, that's a good thing. Most of it we'll leave. We tied them all down. We cut here, and we can see we've got expanded growth. Looks like we've got a caterpillar or something going on here. Get rid of that. Yeah, that's your contender peach. Sorry, my mistake. Thank you, wife. So yeah, and it actually got, come around here, you'll see it's got some fruit on it, which surprised us because the other peach was also destroyed. So down in here, we didn't remove any. This is what it had, and we left it. We could have removed it because the tree really isn't that big yet, but we want to taste some peaches. So we'll see what happens. There's so few of them, I think the bugs are getting at them. But first year. And over here is our apple. Not very productive. Again, the frost must have got it. We do have a couple of them going here, which we're looking forward to. You can see them in the back over there. This one had a main shoot die off here, so I'm going to get rid of that. Fortunately, this is a 5-in-1 grafted tree. Boy, that's tough. 5-in-1 grafted tree, and the main stalk right there on one of the types of apples is still going. So we were happy after losing this one that we've still got that brand of apple alive. So. And the no aphids, the oil worked great. We're starting to get a little trouble with the Japanese beetles and manually removing them. Hopefully the oil will help them next year. We're here in the orchard for our final update of the season. It's September 3rd. Growing season is winding down. Not much leaf growth anymore on the trees. What fruit there is or would be still ripening, but pretty much everything is over for the year. We've got a couple of surprises since our last filming, particularly our new apricot that we got this year. Turns out it's not an apricot after all. Even though it says on the sign here, sun gold apricot up there, I had noticed, but down here it says nectarine sun gold. And when it first started getting that fruit on it that we saw in the last video, when they were small, we said, okay, those are apricots. And then they started getting bigger, and I'm like, those look more like peaches. And then I realized that first of all, let me say that I've never done these peaches and apricots before, because it's not conducive to this climate. They're just now becoming viable in this area with the temperature changes that are occurring. So I don't know how to recognize them that well. So what happened was we have an apricot down here that got frostbit, and it sent up some sucker shoots. And I looked at those leaves, and they're like round, and I'm like, that doesn't look like an apricot. The peach has these kind of leaves, so I'm like, that's a peach. And we just now found out that it is a nectarine. So we've got a little of everything going on here. Unfortunately, you don't see any nectarines on this tree because we watched them grow and start to ripen all summer long, and we were squeezing them regularly to see if they were getting soft. And my wife Holly said that the last time she squeezed them, they were getting soft. Well, guess what? Next day, all gone. And we think the deer got them. As soon as they started smelling ripe, they were able to, I believe it was deer, they pushed in. You can see broken branches in here, which tells me maybe there wasn't squirrels. Squirrels could have probably got them without doing as much damage. So I fixed one broken branch right here. I tied it up, and because it wasn't that bad, and I'm hoping it'll heal. We'll see how that turns out. So no nectarines for us this year, but we'll see what happens next year. The other thing is this nectarine, we looked it up, is not good in this climate zone. It's like, what, 6, I believe? So we wouldn't have never ordered that. We'll see what happens if it can survive the winter and grow in the spring. So stay tuned. So over here we have our cherry, and it did pretty good this year. It had a lot of good new growth. It wasn't as badly affected by the Japanese beetles because of the milky spores we did last fall. And it still got chewed up pretty bad though for the Japanese beetles, as you can see. And it's actually turning yellow now because of the fall, but it was healthy up until this point. It looks like it's getting ready to drop its leaves pretty soon. So what we're going to do next spring is add one more Japanese beetle preventative measure, and that's going to be cedar oil. We're going to spray with cedar oil first thing as soon as I guess the leaves start to bud out, and that deters the Japanese beetles from staking claim in this orchard. Over here we have our one of our peaches or pears, Bartlett, I think. No, let's see. Yeah, that's our Bartlett, and it had great growth. I predict that pears are going to do the best in this orchard. A lot of it was going up straight, so I've spread it out. We talked about the spreader bar that I used last year to get that branch to move, because you can't just tie it over, it pulls the whole tree. So I use that technique, and it seems to be working pretty good. And as you can see, I have tied each limb down and formed it so that they're growing out and opening up that center and maximizing the sunlight exposure. So no fruit on this one at all because the frost got the buzz. We had a terrible two frosts this spring. It got everything wiped out, which is not the worst thing in the world. For new trees, you don't want them really putting a lot of energy into fruit production. You want to establish the root system and the upper branches. So we were a little disappointed, but not that bad. So this is our Honeycrisp apple, and it is another one that gets chewed up by the Japanese beetles, but with manual removal, I've saved it pretty much, and we had a lot of good growth on it, so we're looking forward to next year. This was one of our disasters in the spring. It is a peach contender, I believe, and it got frostbite. Reliance got frostbite like all the other trees and lost all its leaves. It was actually doing great. It survived the winter, had a great big burst of leaves and buds, and then the frost hit, and I didn't realize that it was susceptible to frostbite. I knew flower buds were susceptible, so I didn't really do anything. I could have bagged it. I wish I had bagged it then, but it killed it up top. But fortunately, we've got all these suckers coming up in the bottom, and I've picked one in the back, put it through the center loop there so that it holds it straight, and I'm going to make that our main trunk next year when we do the trimming. We're leaving these in for now just so that it can have photosynthesis going on, building the root system, and in the spring in the winter we'll come to our pruning and we'll take all those suckers off and we'll leave that one going in the back. And it got set back a couple of years, but at least it survived. Here's our plum, our #1 problem child with Japanese beetles, and it really took a beating again this year. As you can see, it's almost completely defoliated. And there's another one. They're relentless. They never quit. Here's one right here. Whoop. It fell off. I don't have my collection system going because they're pretty much gone for the year. I find one or two here and there, but nothing like all summer long. So again, the cedar oil will be a treatment that we're hoping can help this poor guy get through a summer without getting totally destroyed by these Japanese beetles. I don't see any more on there. There's not much left to eat. And here's another frostbit sensitive tree. It was our apricot, which now is our one and only apricot, because that one was supposed to be an apricot. And again, we were fortunate that it got suckers growing out of the bottom, and it looks like it's above the root graft, so I'm pretty sure it's a apricot. And we'll find out next year. The leaf shape is correct. So apparently you can graft an apricot onto some other kind of a rootstock that isn't even apricot. So if it's got a sucker coming up from the rootstock, it could be a totally different tree. So I think we're okay. We still have an apricot. And this is our other pear, which did awesome. And everything was going up the center. It really took off up the center. So I've got them all tied down in positions so that each branch has its own little slot going around, and looks like it's getting trained kind of nice. Nothing eating this tree, not even the caterpillars this year, so pretty pleased. It might even still be growing up there a little bit. So we'll have peaches or pears next year. Now this was our peach, our only peach that survived, our only peach apricot combination that survived. It didn't lose its leaves. It actually had 3 or 4 peaches on it. They're later peaches, so we were watching those again, seeing if they're going to get hard, and they're just starting to get hard, and the next thing you know, they're wiped out. And to add insult to injury, they even left the pits down in the bottom after they ate the peaches. So I'm going to have to set up a trail cam and see if it's squirrel or deer. Moving on to our 5-in-1 apple tree, and we have one apple. There she is. I don't even want to touch it, it might fall off. Be careful right there, see that? Not the greatest looking apple, but it is an apple. And we had a bunch more over there, and something got those too, right, because they got ripe. This is the only one that must be out of reach. So I kind of knew the deer would get the fruit. I put the fences up mostly to keep them from chewing on the leaves and the branches and setting the tree back too far, and I kind of anticipate that we're not really going to be able to keep fruit until the trees get up high enough where they're growing out of reach of the deer. That wraps it up for this year. Stay tuned for next year and we'll show you what kind of fruit we get.